Would you call the roll, please?
Loretta Arthur. Here. Robin Hanger.
Here.
Dennis Smith. Tony Casada. Mike Meyer.
Here. All right, please join me in the invocation. Ms. Loretta, will you lead the pledge? Lord, we just thank you for this day and time that we have together. We pray, Lord, that you will give us wisdom and that we will use it to decide well for the citizens of Holly Hill. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Y'all looked over the minutes from the March 7th?
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
Well, I'm going to have to bring up an addition that I think needs to be made.
Okay.
Sorry.
The votes, all right. The votes were, we can, not. I'm sorry. I have a motion, and a first and a second, right? So now we can have discussion.
Yep.
I got ahead of myself. In the report of the votes, the votes weren't there. We had the motions, and I sent Eleni a text about it earlier today. The approval wasn't there. A motion to approve, and then there was no report of the vote, so whether it was unanimous or 3 or 4.
So that comes on when the minutes are approved and posted, so it won't come on the agenda, it'll come after this meeting on the posting on the website. I checked with Val, and that's what she said it's always been. It comes on the tail end after the meeting, after it's been approved.
And I was confused by it too, so I went back and looked at other minutes and other meetings.
Yeah.
It was usually there.
Yeah, that's now on the, approval post-meeting. So
Okay.
the minutes that were approved from December are posted to the website on a separate attachment with what you're looking for, that little gray box that
Right.
says motion, second, and the ayes or nays.
Okay.
That's now on that portion of it.
I'm not buying that. I think that it should be reported in these minutes here that it was approved either unanimously or not. I'm not sure that it's a great big deal, except that,
Is it that the program won't show it that way?
Correct.
So it's a
Okay.
programming issue?
Yeah, I mean, where I type, where it says motion to approve or whatever it is, motion to add or approve by Robin Hanger, seconded by Loretta Arthur, I can always add in there, but it's not going to be in that little gray box. That doesn't exist
oh, I don't
anymore.
care about the gray box. The other ones weren't either. It was more the same typing, and it said,
Okay, yeah, I can add it in typing, but it won't be in that format like you've seen on previous ones, because it doesn't exist anymore.
Not all updates are good.
excuse me? Oh, yeah.
Updates are good to the
Okay,
technology.
all right. It just kind of leaves you hanging, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all I was thinking. All right. Well, thank you, Eleni, for taking care of that. Now we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All in favor, opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. All righty. Too many papers that look alike, I'm sorry. All right, Mr. Walker, I believe you were up.
Yes, I'm going to ask, Eleni, can you bring up the picture of the containers? There we go. Thank you. So the city has been receiving requests to place shipping containers on parcels in both the commercial areas as well as residential areas. There are folks who'd like to put these in their side and backyards. Also, some of the businesses and business districts are less intense business districts and are asking to place these in various areas of the property. We, in our land development code right now, don't specifically have anything to address these types of containers. We don't have anything that specifically allows them or anything that specifically disallows them. When staff is asked about them, it's staff's opinion that these types of containers are used for and meant for temporary purposes, that they're not designed to be placed permanently on a property for use as storage. They typically are built well for what they do. They store goods, they're placed on an 18-wheeler, a ship, or a train. They get the goods to where they need to go, and that's really what they were designed and built for. That's why they're not really attractive. They're not meant to be something that is on a property and adding to the aesthetic value of the property. And it's also staff's opinion that if they're left unregulated, they're going to really detract from our commercial areas and also our residential areas if we begin to allow these to be placed throughout the city. But because our code doesn't have any specific guidance on them or even define what these shipping containers are, one of the things that staff did was reach out to other jurisdictions to see how they handled these types of containers. And for the most part, they are allowed only in industrial-type areas, not in the lighter commercial areas, and certainly not in any residential areas. So in putting together the ordinance, we had to come up with a definition of really what a shipping container is. And this is the proposed definition. And in the proposed definition, it originally had the word reusable steel vessel, and I'm removing the word steel to just say a reusable vessel. So the definition proposed is a shipping container, also known as an intermodal container, is defined as a reusable vessel that is originally, specifically, or formally designed for or used in the packing, shipping, movement, or transportation of freight, articles, goods, or commodities, and is also designed for or capable of being mounted or moved on a rail car, truck trailer, or loaded on a ship for intermodal freight transport. And just for clarification, such a container is not a storage shed. That's added because that's one of the arguments that staff is hearing from citizens is that's a shed. There's no difference between that and a shed, and so I should be able to put it in my backyard. Just to talk a little bit about what the ordinance proposes. It proposes to restrict the use of these shipping containers to our industrial areas, to our I-1 and I-2. I-1 is a light industrial, and I-2 is a heavy industrial zoning district. Permanent storage use would be restricted to those areas. And permanent use means more than 14 days within a calendar year, except that wouldn't apply on active construction sites. On active construction sites, they could come in, get a permit, and place it there for more than 14 days during the period of construction. They would be prohibited in all other straight zoning districts. They'd be prohibited on properties within the CRA, whether they are industrial in nature or not. The proposed ordinance would also require that these containers be placed behind the front plane of a principal structure, instead of being able to be placed in front. They would not be able to be located in the principal rear and side yard setbacks, except if they were proper, if they in size were less than 250 square feet, they would be allowed to be placed within 8 feet of the rear property line instead of 15, which is the setback that is required for industrial areas. If the container is visible from any public rights-of-way, it would have to be enclosed in a 8-foot-high stucco enclosure, which having an enclosure around this steel container is not something that would be abnormal because we require enclosures for dumpsters, which are steel containers. Also, we would not allow any plumbing, electric, or air conditioning to be placed inside the shipping container. We want to ensure that it would not become something that is occupied or converted to some other use. It would strictly be able to be used for storage, and what goes in it is something that would be subject to review by either the fire marshal, building official, or the fire chief. So the question then would come up, well, who is this going to apply to? If the commission, if the board recommends this for approval and the commission approves it, who's going to be affected by it? Well, any shipping containers that have received a permit prior to the adoption of this ordinance would be able to keep it, no matter what. If they received a permit and they're on residential, or they're on CC1, which is a less intense commercial use than industrial, they'd be able to keep it. Any that do not have a permit, they just got it, stuck it on the property, it went unnoticed for at least a year. If it's been on the property for at least a year, they would have the opportunity to come in and get a permit. But they would also have the burden of proof to show that it's been there for at least a year would be on the property owner. What does that mean? It might mean that they say, hey, I have an invoice here, I bought the thing 2.5 years ago, it's been here, nobody has said anything about it. That would probably suffice. It might mean that it's common knowledge that it's been there. People know it's been there, folks in the city know it's been there. One example would be Heavenly Cheesecake. She's had, 1 or 2 of these on her property for many, many years. So she would be able to keep it. If someone were able to show in an aerial photograph, even here at the city, we have different methods of being able to look back, 2 months ago, what was on a property, 4 months ago, what was on a property, 6 months ago, what was on a property. These are large enough in nature that they'd be picked up. We'd be able to verify if it was there a year ago. If it's not permitted and it's been just placed there within the last year and it's not in an industrial zone, it would have to go. So that's how it would apply to folks at this point, and that those are the high points of the ordinance in how we would propose to deal with these shipping containers. So it will be staff's recommendation to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 78 General Provisions, Section 78-14 Definitions, to add definitions, and amend Chapter 114 entitled Zoning, Article 3, Supplementary District Regulations, Division 4 Buildings and Structures, to add a new section titled Shipping Containers, and renumber existing sections as needed, and add definitions to Section 114-746, specific terms defined of the Land Development Regulations. And that concludes my presentation.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Walker at this moment?
I don't know that it's a question, but I do question the so-called aesthetics of it not being presentable or whatever, however you mentioned that. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. To me, mechanical, and coming from mechanical all my life, I've seen these things been made into all kinds of things, and to me, I don't see a problem with them, the way their appearance is. I think what goes around them, how they're presented, depending on how they're being used, is the question, not the unit itself. They are very secure, and that's why people use them. They're strong, durable. So that's, I guess, more of a comment than anything.
How would something like a pods be affected in this scenario? Because many people that are moving will take them on their property for like 6 months. Would this fall under that same category, and what would you do in that
No,
scenario?
pods are addressed in a completely different area of the code, and they're allowed.
Okay.
So, yeah, the code does have a place for storage containers, which are bona fide storage containers. This is not a storage container, this is a shipping container. These are built and designed to be put on ships, trains,
Trains.
and that's their purpose, and folks want to use them as storage, but that's not what they're designed for. But the pods are addressed in the code, so they would not be affected at
So they're
all.
already addressed, okay.
There's one thing that I've noticed about these things is that you can come across these things very inexpensively sometimes. I mean, that's one of
And
the
that's-
attractions to them, because
Yes.
as Robin pointed out, they're very secure, and then you get them very inexpensively, and next thing you know, it all makes sense, that why people want to use them, for sure.
Well, the building materials being so costly at this point in time, a lot of people are moving to the shipping containers, but I don't know if you guys have Googled. I think if you want to Google shipping container homes, some of these designs are out of the, I mean, they're just amazing. So how can we say, okay, we can use it as long as there's a architectural design, or there's some, I mean, is that a possibility, or?
And that's a very good point. We're not talking about, the things that you see, for example, down in, what do they call it, Boxy Park in Lake Nona, or the Yard in Orlando, where they have made, restaurants almost out of these things, and little coffee cafes, and just really, I guess you would say, eclectic or funky places that people go to. They have some of them that they've turned into bars, and they really can be turned into attractive homes and offices. And so that's not what this addresses. In that case, they would be almost a building material.
Right.
So they would go through the whole process of going through the Florida Building Code for plumbing, electrical, and, how many exits they have and window sizes and that type of thing. So when we say that they can't be equipped for, with plumbing and electrical and that type of thing, it's within the setting of being allowed on the property as a storage container. If someone came in and put before us a proposal to put together a community of these, or a home or an office or something like that, that would be addressed very differently.
Thank you.
I just remember we had a case go before the city commission several years ago about this type of storage container being on a residential property. And my recollection is there was some discussion about the owners putting the same exterior
As the
on-
house,
as the house.
so on
Right.
Center Street.
Oh, is that where?
Yeah,
okay.
Center near
And
6.
would that
Center and
matter?
8th.
Would that change things if they put up vinyl siding along it to make it look like a house, or is it still a no? I just remembered that case.
We can take this and add different architectural, requirements. This,
No, I'm talking about it, would it be okay, because this is only an industrial, that property's on residential.
Residential.
Residential
right.
property,
He had a commercial business. That's where he was storing his stuff,
yeah.
and it was quite a ways off the road and everything, but you could see it. Yeah.
I just did he ever try to look like his house? No?
He ended up taking them out, didn't he?
Yeah, he took them out.
Is that what he was doing? So we don't want this in residential, even if they can make it have the same siding as their house? Because then it'd be an accessory structure
Right.
and come under that regulation.
right, no, the proposal is right now not
Okay.
to allow them.
I just remember thinking about it. I just remembered a case. There's a lot of discussion about that.
And but this is as a storage unit. The one thought that came to me was, if it's in a site where it's allowed and you're using it as a storage unit, what if you need a controlled environment in that storage unit?
If you need a controlled environment, like a climate-controlled storage, then at this point, the suggestion would be to go to a climate-controlled area. Now,
Right.
people can, this doesn't take away the ability for folks to get sheds or to build something on the property.
Oh, that's.
And
That's true.
air conditioning and climate control to it. So that can still be done on a property. We're just addressing this particular item, which is just, it's not built for that.
Okay.
I have another comment.
Go, please.
You say that these are shipping containers. They are shipping containers, but they are also sold and marketed as storage containers. There's a company called PacVan that sells, leases, and operates these as storage units. I can understand us writing a procedure or writing something to say that it can't be at a residential house, unless it was somewhere like, and I'm just using this as an example, it is outside of our city, but somewhere like Bunnell, in the country, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But in the city limits, I could see a residential house, this not being appropriate. But I don't believe that we can classify these as shipping containers only when they're marketed and sold and used widely as storage containers, both temporary, permanent, by companies out there. So I believe that I would go with it being in residential areas and restricted within the city limits, but I don't believe that we would have, I wouldn't be in favor of saying it couldn't be at a business, or anybody that has a commercial business that can put it behind a building or behind a fence, like you said, out where it can be seen. I can see that, because like using Mike Myers' place, he has nowhere to put it really, and so it would have to be next to, you'd see it. But if you could put it behind your building, and say it was a 10 by 10 one of these, and you needed to lock up valuable cameras or lasers or something like that, this is ideal. That's what these are used for. So I think there needs to be a little bit more leniency to be able to use them in commercial uses, but have them not seen behind a fence or a metal exterior around it or something that makes it look like a metal shed. The reason for these things is more durability than anything. Hurricanes ain't gonna blow it over. Tornadoes ain't gonna lift it. Very rarely. I mean, we would have something like that here, so
Well, they're gonna be anchored. If
Yeah.
you're making them permanent, they're gonna be anchored.
Yeah.
That's one of the rules. for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think that residential, within the city limits, I would be fine with, but I think there needs to be some leniency on businesses.
May I? I just want to pipe in what my thoughts are. I'm all repurpose and reuse. I love repurpose and reuse. So for me, it would be about aesthetics, because I don't want to look at a shipping container really anywhere in our city limits. But if you made it aesthetically and retrofitted it in some way, I wouldn't really care what they did with it. But for me, it's about aesthetics. We want to, uphold our property values for our neighbors. Having a big shipping container right next door to somebody else's property isn't, aesthetically pleasing or valuable for a next door neighbor. But if we could make it that way, then it would be, fine for me. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, that is why it was brought before the board to get ideas, to get thoughts. We can certainly tweak it if it's this board's pleasure to say that you want to allow it in other types of commercial areas. However, the outside of it has to be siding or stucco or something that we apply architectural standards to it. So that's something that we can add to it, and certainly in the presentation to the commission would be, the board feels that these should be allowed in other areas. However, we add some aesthetics or some architectural requirements to it.
So we could approve it for industrial as is, and then for maybe the commercial aspect with aesthetic.
So right now,
Is that
the restriction is, if it can be, even for industrial, if it can be seen from the right-of-way,
Right,
then it has to be behind a masonry wall.
right.
Would that be acceptable for commercial? I mean, we're saying you can't see it, so
No.
from a right-of-way. So if you can, you got to put up a masonry wall in industrial
Or an enclosure.
or an enclosure, so
What-
would an enclosure be good enough? I mean, if it's good enough for a dumpster in commercial, would it be good enough for this?
I read in here an 8-foot wall. What's the standard dimension on these things? Height?
tall.
They're right, yeah, they're 8 feet tall.
8 feet.
I don't
Like 40
ever
feet
recall
tall.
standing close to one.
They're 8 by 8 by 40, normally.
Okay, all right. Yeah. And why did we say that it had to be masonry? That was the question I was gonna ask. Are dumpsters are required masonry now?
Yes.
Okay. No, that answers that question. Thank you. So what I'm hearing, I think that I'm hearing the board say is that they would like to recommend that we expand the areas that are allowed, that restrict to those areas that it can't be seen, and that if it is, if it is seen, that that meets architectural, we have some architectural requirements? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would go with that.
And Scott has asked, would the masonry enclosure be enough? So rather than putting siding on the thing, and,
I believe it would be as sufficient as a dumpster. You know, if a guy wanted to build a masonry square 8 foot tall and slide that in there, I think it's overkill, but I would go with it.
Staff's recommendation would still be that they not be allowed within the corridor, within our CRA, our redevelopment district overlay. As far as them going into other zoning districts, what other commercial districts do you propose to allow them in? So we would have the industrial 1, industrial 2. The next
What is-
most intense would be CC 1.
What is a place like Bob's Space Racers? What is that? Is that industrial over there?
That area is
I'll look it up.
industrial by Whack-A-Mole.
Yeah.
Is industrial. NC's, yes, in fact, that area that's industrial.
Okay, what is my place?
You're CC 1.
So is that light?
You're in the corridor.
You're in the
You're in
You're in
the
the
corridor.
corridor.
oh, yeah.
See that?
Unless the commission disagrees and says, no, we should allow them in the corridor.
I think if they were in the corridor, then they need to be in, out of sight. Like I'll tell you, I've got one that I've had since '98, but you can't see it from the road, and it's covered on 3 sides with a metal building that it slides into. But it's there and used because I couldn't build a more secure facility for the type of inventory that I have in that room.
Right.
I think if they're out of sight, they're out of sight.
How would that work if we said, okay, it goes to, we're okay with it being confined to industrial? Could there be exceptions for people if they come in and given an aesthetic design, or how would that work? Do they have to go through a whole variance, or, I mean, how would it just be a no to them?
The way it's written
future?
now, it would be a no,
Okay.
the way that it's written now. But we can, again, discuss different ways of making them available in other zoning districts.
Could be by special exception, make them a special exception to another zoning district, right? So that-
Special exception is more of a use per se,
Okay.
and not a structure. I think it would be better just to, if you're going to expand it beyond, even in the industrial, you can't see it. That's a rule.
Right.
In the industrial. So you have that criteria in the industrial, you could expand it to other uses, other types of, commercial uses. I don't know how much land you're talking about, I guess Nova Road, but once you exclude the whole CRA out, and then you allowed an industrial, how much land are we really talking about? It's probably Nova Road, I would think, would be the most logical place where it could be. And you could either use the same criteria of can't be seen, or you could add an option of either can't be seen or it has to have the same architectural style as the principal structure.
I would go with that. I just think, let's use an example of like Roy's Place on Nova Road, since you said Nova Road. If for some reason they needed to store something that was extremely valuable, these things are what you use that for. If it was behind that building and you couldn't see it from the road at all, I think that it should be allowed. But if it can be seen, if there's, where they want to put it is on the side of the building and it can be seen, okay, you can do that. But it's got to match the building. In other words, you got to
Or have a
build,
masonry wall or something.
or whatever the building is,
Yeah.
you know.
So allow them in other commercial
With-
zoning districts, but state that they can't be seen from the road,
Right.
or that they can't be seen, they must be
Same
completely hidden.
Same wording.
Okay.
Or, if they're going to be seen, they have to have the same architectural style as the principal structure.
Yes.
Some principal structures don't have much of an architectural style. Some of them are
Like
metal
Flight.
buildings
Flight is a
themselves.
big metal building.
Yeah, some of them are big
So-
metal buildings themselves, so it's,
Well, what would be the difference in them building a partial metal building? If they just put a two-sided wall up and covered the metal.
they wouldn't be able to just slap up two walls because they'd have to meet the Florida Building Code.
Right.
These are not, the fact that they're not designed for that use, they're not really covered by the Florida Building Code.
Right.
So the most sheds and other types of structures that are for storage and that you could add, for example, air conditioning to or things like that, those are governed by the Florida Building Code. We have rules and regulations for them that the state puts in place. These are just big metal boxes. So we could say that if they're going to be in an area that's visible, that they have to, even if it's next to a steel building, that it needs to have some type of an architectural feature.
I would be okay with saying if you're requiring dumpsters to be in a masonry enclosure,
Right.
if you want this, then you got to put a masonry three-sided wall or two-sided wall up. If you're doing it for dumpsters, okay, but don't just exclude them and say no.
Okay.
There's got to be an exception in a commercial-type business because these are so commercial usable and friendly.
And there seems to me, was looking at the citywide zoning today, and we have a whole lot more CC1 than we have I, by a long shot. By a long shot.
Isn't the CC1 pretty much the CRA?
No, I didn't use.
CC1 is our dominant commercial zoning district.
We have CC1 outside the CRA?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
A lot along the railroad. I was surprised at how much there was along the railroad, actually.
Yeah.
I know the CC1 was created as part of the redevelopment district.
Right.
When we did the CRA, we created the CC1 to help spur the growth in the CRA.
So what I'm hearing is that you want to expand it to, are you proposing the lighter commercial districts as well, such as the B1s, the B2s that are meant for coffee shops and things like that, or mainly CC1?
I would say CC1.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it needs to go any farther than CC1.
So then we would allow them on industrial, light industrial, heavy industrial, CC1, as long as they're not visible, and if they are visible, then they need to be
Contained.
enclosed in a
Masonry.
masonry structure, decorative masonry structure.
Approved. We could say just an approved structure, because I think there may be some times when a guy's, I don't know, if the only way you can put a dumpster out, no matter what your building looks like, is a masonry structure around it, then it's cut and dry.
Right.
Then leave it cut and dry, because if we leave too many loopholes, we're gonna end up, with a
Exception
mess.
becomes the rule.
You're going to end up with a bad rule there. So I think, yes, if it can be seen, it has to be behind a masonry structure. That's it.
Now, as far as, I just want to clarify one thing for the board. As far as, when we say the corridor, the properties that are being addressed are those that abut or touch Ridgewood or LPGA, not State, Carswell, ones that may be within the corridor, within the CRA, because the CRA is wide
Right.
as well. So it would only be those ones along Ridgewood and directly touching LPGA. Do you want to allow those as well to be able to have,
If it can't be seen.
It's unseen, right.
Like, say, Carswell, the Quonset huts. They can't put one there unless they put a masonry structure around it.
Okay.
And it fit the code, and there's enough setback and all that. So they wouldn't be allowed to unless they could do all that. If they could meet that requirement, then they can do it.
And I think you recently pointed out that Ride Now Power has one, don't they? In the back there?
yes, they have one in the back
Right.
that's
So
been there for
then we would
a long
be
time.
disallowing theirs if we,
Well, theirs has been there.
It's been there.
Yeah,
Right.
It's like mine.
this wouldn't bother, this wouldn't affect
Okay.
theirs.
Because they were already there.
Right. Okay. So basically, everything else would apply. The difference is we're opening it up to CC1 and saying, as long as you can't see it, you're good, and if you can see it,
behind the wall.
behind a wall or masonry, three-sided masonry structure.
Right.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable to me. You? Okay. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion that we make a recommendation to adopt, though. Miss Heidi, I'm so sorry. Please come on. My mind is about 100 miles away tonight. I apologize.
Thank you. I am Heidi Heller, 460 Ridgewood Avenue of the future excellent city of Holly Hill. Thank you for allowing me some time. Just a few thoughts about this. I certainly agree with everybody about I think I agree with residential. I'm not too sure whether we're not having anything in residential. We're not having any in residential, because I think that leads to the deterioration and
Right.
bringing down the property value, even though it may be covered with this, anything, that's good. So my other thought was, I see where it was removed steel vessel, a reusable steel vessel. That's fine, but my thought about vessel, I don't like the word vessel, and that's because the Supreme Court of the United States had a filing with the city of Riviera Beach and Lozman, where they define vessel as a craft whose purpose to reasonably degree is the transportation of persons, cargo, equipment from place to place in navigable waters in which purpose is undertaken. Even though vessel is used in many contexts, I don't like it in this context, so I'm hoping a context of a wash basin is a vessel, a flower pot is a vessel. I would like it just to say
I know of a
container.
place in the human, where a human.
Pardon?
I know of a place where a human is called a vessel.
That's correct. So I think, why don't we just stick with, I would like to just stick with the word that's already used, container, that removes other thing. A ship, a steel ship, I helped build steel ships, so that can be put in the backyard with a wall around it? I don't think so, so that's just a thought I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to admit, I had a similar thought. So, did you get that? Brian, did you get that? Ms. Heidi would like us to change the word vessel to container?
We can change it to structure or container. That's fine.
Which one?
Both.
We can say reusable, we'll use the word container. So I'll strike vessel, replace it with container, remove the word steel, and add CC1 to the zoning district that is allowed to have the containers. And say that they can go anywhere as long as they're CC1, but none of the B zonings, no residential zonings, and they can go in the industrial CC1 as long as they're not visible, and if they are visible, they need to be in a masonry enclosure.
And they still need to meet the structures setbacks for those districts.
They'll still need to meet the structures or the setbacks for that. I'm not sure if staff will recommend that in CC1 they can go in the corridor. They can go in the corridor as long as they're not seen. I'm not sure about whether or not I'll recommend that they can be seen, even if they're
Okay.
on those properties that are on Ridgewood.
Right.
Enclosed structures.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with them being not visible. And this isn't just me. Staff doesn't come up with these
Right.
ordinances
Right.
just because this is a result of others that have talked about it and information that's been conveyed to me, and also what I hear as far as the public. So, please don't think this is something that I just cook up on my own.
If you did, you're a genius.
I'm not that important.
Don't have that much time on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as all other CC1, if it's not visible, or if it is visible being in masonry structure, that I will recommend. It's just the properties that are on Ridgewood visible, and whether or not we'll recommend that they can be seen even if they're in an enclosure.
No, we were saying if they're on Ridgewood and they can be seen, they would have to be closed. You're saying not even then? I'm saying if they
Right.
can't be seen.
Right, no, if they can't be seen, it's not an issue. If they can go anywhere in CC1 if they can't be
As long
seen.
as they can't be seen.
Right. And if they can be seen in most areas of CC1, they can be put in an enclosure. But I'm talking about the ones that touch Ridgewood. Those are the only ones that I have to think about whether or not
I
we'll
understand.
recommend.
Whether they can
But
be.
that doesn't change the board's recommendation.
No,
You have
no.
your recommendation.
Right.
He's talking about staff.
Staff's recommendation.
I
Yes,
don't know
sir.
if it's appropriate. Ms. Heidi had another question.
Oh,
but-
go ahead. Either of you. It can be just a little bit informal with a few, I think.
Heidi Heller, 460 Ridgewood Avenue. Thank you again. I forgot the most important thing. Is there a limit on the number of containers that could be put on a parcel?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
That's not, we haven't put a restriction on that. The number of structures that can go on a property is limited by it's an impervious surface ratio. So we say you have a property, 35% of it, or in the case of CC1, 65% of the property can have structures on it. So as long as you are under that amount, you can have as many containers as you can fit on the property, they just can't be stacked.
Is there a requirement for a foundation underneath of the container? Or
A slab.
A slab, okay.
Right. And anchored.
Okay.
Okay, so then we say that they have to have a foundation of some sort. You said a 4-inch concrete slab. And they have to be anchored.
Yes.
All right. Okay, then what we're looking for is, can you tell us all the things that, the recommendation you're going to make so that we can make sure we make our motion correctly?
I guess it's your recommendation. I think really what you're looking for, this
Right.
board's recommendation.
Okay, right. Well, Scott, are you going to word it for us, what we just came up with, or you want to
Sure,
make an attempt at it?
Let's see, you would have a motion to approve the proposal from staff, subject to the deletion of the word steel, subject to the deletion of the word vessel and replacing that with container, and allowing it to be in the CC1 as either if it was not visible from a right-of-way, or if it's visible from a right-of-way, it would have to be enclosed in a masonry facility like a garbage dumpster.
I'll motion that.
Okay,
Is that everything?
is that it? All right, then so we're not going to make any address about the CRA, along the US 1.
That's, as I understood it, that was a concern Brian had to think about, but this body was thinking that you were going to make the recommendation and not distinguish between whether or not the CRA property or CC1 property abutted US 1.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Okay with me?
All right. So,
Second.
so you've made the motion for what?
I make a motion for the way Scott read it, to change it.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. We unanimously said it.
Robin Hanger,
Yes.
Loretta Arthur,
Yes.
Mike Meyer.
Yes.
And you understand, staff's recommendation may be a little different.
Yes.
We all talked about that.
Right.
All right.
And I believe the foundation and the being tied down was already in the regulation. We didn't have
It
to-
is.
Right, it was. All right. Well, do we have any old business? Have any board staff communication?
No, sir.
I would like to apologize for being late. I had a surgery a couple weeks ago, and I've had therapy for it, and I completely forgot. It was hurting me today, and I went, and I completely forgot about tonight. So I apologize for my dress and for being late.
You forgive it. All right. Our next meeting is?
May 2nd.
Be May 2nd.
May 2nd, okay.
You have anything?
Hopefully, we will by then.
Maybe.
We'll see, maybe.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
Second.
Requires no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's go.
Go see your basketball game.
All right.